I am being watched. Welcome everyone to Melfus TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Person of Interest Season 2, Episode 10. It's called Shadowbox. So spoilers for the episode as always. This one's got an interesting ending. This is probably other than maybe like the Season 1 finale, and maybe when there was kind of like a two-parter at the start of the season, I can't think of many episodes that end with such a direct cliffhanger as this one does, and that there does seem to be very big story implications for the next episode to follow, which is mainly that Reese is, unless they do something very quickly, is not going to be around to do the next case. The episode might be entirely about getting him out of trouble because he's been arrested by the FBI. They don't know he's the man in the suit necessarily. He's one of 4 people at the end who could be the man in the suit. Something that was set up quite well in the episode is that you've got these other sort of like mercenaries that are all wearing similar types of clothes to Reese. So you get this ending with the Rolling Stones playing. It's a big moment, it's a big thing. But it does leave me with these interesting questions of, well, what is the next episode then? Exactly. Is it all about trying to free him and somehow like sneak him out of a police station or FBI custody? Is it about trying to somehow prove that he's not the guy they're looking for? Or is it more just he's like locked up, so therefore we have to like solve a case without him? Maybe Finch with Carter and Fusco just have to do something on their own. All of it sounds intriguing. All of it sounds like we're doing something very fresh and different next time. And that's not to say that this episode didn't feel pretty fresh in a lot of ways, because it did. The big thing that made this episode feel different to me was that for a lot of the episode, the person of interest, which is this young woman, what was her name, Abby, we don't actually get to meet her until quite a good chunk into the episode. Typically, an episode of the show will be Reese following the subject, learn about who they are, and then maybe trying to interact with them without revealing why he's really there, or something like that, right? That's typically what the show does. Here, they can't find her. She's kind of off-grid with her boyfriend, and they're planning something, and we're seeing sort of like hints and evidence of what they're up to, but we never actually get to see her until a good chunk into the episode. And part of that is because she is intentionally doing all this kind of illegal and shady stuff. Now, admittedly, as we find out, there's a good reason for it. And that's one of the things that I think was, just by the way TV shows are written, it was quite obvious it was going to turn out to be a good reason or a noble goal, despite the fact that it looks like she's doing something very bad. The episode even opens with her recording that she's sending to her parents saying she's always followed the rules and she's always tried to be a good person, but she's about to break a bunch of rules in a really big way. So we'll get into like what they're actually up to and all that, but it gets a little bit personal for Reese because it's tied to her trying to effectively find justice for veterans who have been ripped off by a scummy insurance, not insurance, like a loan shark, effectively. There's this charity for returning heroes, I think it was called, and she was working there, and along with her boyfriend, who is a vet himself, although she lost her brother in combat, that's part of her backstory. They discover that he's intentionally like the loan payments and interest are like extortionate, and he's getting kickbacks for the foreclosures on these veterans' homes and things like that. It's all just kind of a big scam, a very malicious scam at that. And she is helping her boyfriend seek justice for all these people who are being ripped off and losing their homes. And we even hear that some of them are committing suicide because they can't function in society because the help that were promised turns out to be very malicious. That's very much what the story turns out to be about. We don't get a lot of that until the back half of the episode when Reese and Finch are figuring it out, but the main point here is that Reese kind of ends up sympathizing with a lot of this, and partly because of his past, partly because he understands trying to make up or pay a debt for someone that he's lost, namely the love of his life, but also sympathizing with these other people who have come home and struggled to find a place. It's kind of an age-old story. Hell, it's what First Blood's about. Rambo's about someone who comes back from war and can't fit into society. in this entire show, Reese has been this character who was lost when he came home, and there was a bit more to his story than just being in combat. His goes a little bit deeper than that, but that's still who he is. In fact, one of the heartwarming moments of this episode is where he just kind of tells Finch that he's happy doing what he does now. It's something we've been talking about since early season 1, is Finch giving Reese this purpose that makes him feel fulfilled. And he's at a point now where he's kind of openly just admitting that. He's openly just saying that to Finch. And that's kind of sweet. It's also sweet watching them give the dog a bath together, which is how the episode opens. That's good fun. So, yeah, that stuff is really solid. And I think it does shake up the formula of the episode that we can't find the subject for a while, so it's a lot of like chasing the breadcrumbs of where she's been. Is she stolen something from here? Her boyfriend stole a motorbike from somewhere. Kind of an interesting detail with him that he's got an artificial limb, and that's why he's able to smash glass with what looks like his bare hand. I think it's Reese who figures out he's got an artificial limb, and that's how he was able to do it, which makes some sense. But some of these details as they're sort of going through the episode, I thought it was always obvious it was going to turn out to be a good reason, especially since in the middle of the episode, like Carter's reaction to some of this is that, hey, we have to put out an APB on these people. What they're doing is very serious, and they're doing something very bad. And there's kind of just this hope from Reese that there's a reason for it, and ultimately there is, and ultimately it's one that he can kind of get behind, to the point where he ends up even helping them with their plan against Finch's wishes towards the end of the episode. He helps them with breaking in to try and steal something and all the rest of it. One of my favourite details, actually, amongst all this debating if they should, like, how exactly they should be helping this woman and her boyfriend, because very much when all of this starts coming out, the narrative that's kind of going between the characters is that she's probably been corrupted by this bad influence of this boyfriend. You know, it seems like she was this very sweet, law-abiding person until this guy came into her life. So they kind of paint him as troublesome to some extent, or Finch thinks that at the very least. And then, of course, as the episode goes on, you realise that he's not a bad guy. He's been taken advantage of, and she's trying to look out for him in the way that she couldn't look out for her brother and all the rest of it. And that's what Reese ultimately is sympathising with. But one of my favourite little details is when they're debating what they're doing, and they know that they've stolen some explosives and they've got like plans for a building on Wall Street, and they're talking about what they're doing. I really like the little detail here that Reese suggests that they're going to blow up Wall Street now. They're going to like do some casual terrorism. I love that Finch just points out that no, it can't be that. Because if it was that, then we wouldn't have got the number. That would be a relevant thing. That's the sort of thing that the machine was built to look for. So the fact that we got it means that it's something else. It can't be that. I really like that, because I don't think that's come up in the show before, is that the crime looks like it could be one thing, but the fact that they have the number means that it can't be, and it kind of points to looking through a different avenue. I really like that detail. It was something that I didn't even think about as Reese was suggesting it, but it made a lot of sense when Finch pointed that out. Really like that. Obviously, there's some standoffs with the various characters. One of the big parts of the episode is that because Reese is looking for the girl, it's actually Finch who goes to investigate this loans place. You know, he goes and talks to the guy, but the guy, while he seems like an upstanding dude talking to Finch, it turns out he planted a tracker on Finch, and Finch is, you know, he's disposed of it. He's getting good at spy work. That was actually kind of a sweet little moment as well, is when Reese says, hey, nice job, Finch, because Finch not only spotted that he'd been bugged, but was able to divert the bug by attaching it to a vehicle going to a different state to set them off the trail. All very good. But later that night, Finch breaks back in because he wants to get a look at whatever the guy's hiding, right? Whatever the bad guy's hiding. What was his name? Chappell. Philip Chappell is the guy that was giving out the loans. He goes in to try and break into the computers and do Finch stuff, for lack of a better term. But when he's in there, he runs into the boyfriend. Was it Shane? He runs into him. They're both there for different reasons, and because the alarm's been set off, and the reason why Shane's there is because he's stealing the passcode for a safety deposit box and some other stuff, just plot details stuff. It's the sort of thing that I don't necessarily get into that much. he ends up like sort of giving Finch a ride. When these guys in the suits show up, the sort of the henchmen that have been hired by the bad guy, Shane offers Finch a ride, says, get on the bike or they'll kill you. So he does so, which does lead to a funny line later where Finch, it turns out, quite enjoyed the motorbike ride and might want to get himself one. But we end up with this interesting standoff where Reese is with Abby, the girl in the story, and she is very, she's naturally very alarmed that Reese found where she lived and was waiting for her. This is not like a lot of the subjects in these episodes where they very quickly warm up to Reese because he's a tall, handsome man or whatever. She treats him like a hostile presence for quite a bit. For that entire first scene where she's with him, she treats him like, you're a man in my place, let me go. And even threatens to sick her Marine boyfriend on him. Obviously, we know that Reese has also got a history in the military, which is something he eventually brings up, but there's a little bit here where she doesn't know that he's the best at what he does, and that's a little amusing to the audience, I think. But they do a trade, but there's a fun little bit here where Shane on the phone tells Reese, you better not hurt her, or, I'll raise hell, like, you won't know what's hit you. And Reese is like, yeah, well, same goes to you for my buddy Finch. You better not touch my older brother figure / platonic husband, or whatever we're calling Reese and Finch as a pair these days. Good friends. I don't know, it feels weird to label their relationship in some way, but I enjoyed that. There's just kind of like an absurd layer on top of it because of like how serious the situation is, how threatened everyone's being, because they all think that they're being threatened by an unknown force, because Reese and Finch have just appeared into their story and they're naturally acting with their guard up, right? It makes a lot of sense. If anything, it's almost surprising that more characters in these episodes don't react more off with Reese. And maybe it's just because they're thrust into these situations and Reese is there clearly helping them. Here it's a little bit it's not as clear as that immediately to these characters, so they're a lot more put off by them. So I thought that was good. Again, really shook up the formula of the episode, and it all leads to them, as it turns out, they're going to blow through the floor of a bank to get to a safety deposit box that the villain has to get all of the bank records and some of his money. They want to redistribute it to all the people that he's stolen money from, which is noble enough, and that's kind of what makes Reese want to help them ultimately, and ends up giving them backup and holding off the bad guys whilst they're trying to escape. It ends up with a really fun final segment where Finch goes into the bank and has like fake IDs for them to explain why they're there, because one of the subplots of this episode that I've not even mentioned yet is that Donnelly from the FBI is back, and he's back hunting Reese, the man in the suit. And throughout the episode, he talks to Carter. He offers her a temporary position in the FBI, although he thinks it might become a full-time gig. I wonder if that's how she eventually leaves the show. One of the few things I know about later on in the show is that the actress had to, go at a certain point. I think it's after season 3, because the show's like renewal status was kind of up in the air, and her contract was either up or she was offered something. I don't know the exact details, but either way, I know that Carter is going to leave at some point, and it wouldn't surprise me if eventually a full-time FBI job might be what it is. It would make some sense. She's very good at what she does. It would be climbing the ladder. But no one tell me, obviously. We'll get to that when we do. But Donnelly's pretty determined. Yeah, they've found a way to kind of track. Well, I shouldn't say track. They're not tracking the phone conversations with Reese and Finch. They can't hear them, and they can't just know at a glance that they're doing something. But basically, they can correlate a type of signal whenever there's something going on, like a crime's happened or an incident's happened where people are calling in for help. If they could basically say, oh, this pulse thing at the cell towers here, this fake cell thing was going off at the same time, they can kind of say, oh, the man in the suit's there. We know we should go to this crime scene, and that's what leads them to the FBI building. So Carter's with them. Carter at this point is accepted to be a temporary FBI agent, and clearly is lying through her teeth to try and help Reese and co. Fusco even gets roped in here at this point, because Carter calls him, thinking, oh, he won't be getting tracked, it'll be safer to call him. and he ends up showing up to help. So they're all kind of there pretending not to know each other in the final scenes where the couple and Finch are in the bank lobby and he's got the fake IDs and all that. Finch is like, hey, I'll clean out these bank accounts and send all the money to good charities for veterans. How about that? And they seem happy with that solution. The ending's very exciting, actually. The last 3 minutes as the FBI come into the building, Reese is pinned down in the basement, shooting having a sort of standoff with the bad guys, and then the ultimate reveal that Donnelly's kind of got the man in the suit finally, but there's 4 of them, and he doesn't know which one it is. And of course, Carter's not going to tell him which one it is because she's feigning ignorance. All that was very well paced. All of it kind of boiled to a good natural ending. And yeah, it cuts to black when you realize, oh, Reese is getting arrested here. Donnelly's final words of the episode are handcuff them all. So I'm very curious to see what that leads to next time. But that's not all that happened in the episode, of course. There's some other stuff to talk about. There's more stuff with Carter and Sterling K. Brown, who is Beecher, where there's a little bit of awkward flirting there. The main thing with Beecher, though, is actually more to do with Fusco, because Fusco gets suspicious of this guy, particularly when he finds out that Beecher's got a reputation for having nicer clothes, nicer cars, nicer watches, and he suspects that Beecher might be on the take, might be even part of HR or something. And I don't know if he necessarily was part of HR, but of course he does kind of become part of it or gets roped into it in this episode, because Quinn, Clark Peters' character, calls him in to ask for some intel on some cases that are happening. So I'm not sure if Beecher actually knows he's given information to HR, or if he thinks he's just being a respectable cop by talking to this man. It's actually kind of unclear in the scene. I think Fusco clearly thinks he's just dirty. I think there's some wiggle room here to suggest that maybe he's not aware of who he's talking to is a bad guy, and that maybe he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. Of course, Simmons pops up here, spying on Fusco, who's spying on the conversation and tells him to get lost. Notably, Fusco is a lot more like, you know what, you called in that Davidson thing, you've got Carter sort of looking into, potentially a cop that killed him. You've crossed the line, and now I don't give a shit. Now I've got nothing to lose, so now I'm more dangerous to you. Simmons isn't, scared. He kind of just says, oh, I've heard that a bunch of times, blah, blah, blah. But it does suggest that Fusco is sort of turning a corner here in terms of how much he's going to fight back. And I'd say it's probably the most interesting development in the Fusco dealing with Simmons storyline thus far. I'd forgotten last episode that Fusco didn't actually kill Davidson. Someone pointed this out in the comments. It was just made to look like he'd done it. I feel like Fusco should just tell Carter all of this at some point. I wonder what will motivate him to do that, especially since at this point, he's told her a lot of things. They're both working with Reese and Finch. It would make sense at some point. Maybe he's worried that she wouldn't actually believe him and that she would just think he did actually do it. So that could be a source of drama when it eventually comes out. It could also be maybe even kind of endearing where she just does believe him. And maybe that'll make him realize he's been an idiot for not telling her. That could be an interesting path to take it in. I'm not sure, but it's an interesting subplot in this episode that's continuing this ongoing background thing of HR trying to be relevant again. I guess the main broad things to mention here is that they're going to try and align themselves with the Russian mob because Elias wants nothing to do with them. And because some of the Russians hate Elias, this seems to be where they want to go next. So we'll see how successful that is. That feels that we're setting stuff up for future things. The main thing with this episode, though, absolutely, is where it leaves Reese by the end. And it leaves me fascinated to see what the next episode actually is. If I was to make a guess, I think the obvious thing from a writing standpoint to do here, regardless of what Reese is doing or how he's detained, is he just waiting for a proper... is he being interviewed in an interrogation room for his subplot? I'm not sure. But I would guess that the main plot of the next episode is how the rest of the team have to do a case without him. And that's exciting. I think that sounds like a lot of fun, because Finch can't just tell Carter Fusco where he gets his numbers from. He's not doing that. He's not giving them all the information. but he's still going to have to rely on them to help with whatever he's going to end up doing. It already felt like Finch was getting a little bit more involved and a little bit more active. Arguably, he put himself in the most danger he's been in intentionally in a while. You know, obviously, after the root stuff, he was played it safe. He was scared to go out. He was scared to get involved. But this was like a little nudging thing he was doing all of season 1, and it feels like next episode he's probably going to have to really step up because Reese is lately out of commission. So I think that's cool. I think it's fun. It's exciting. And I said last episode that I think we were coming up to the mid-season break when it was originally airing, and this feels like a good cliffhanger for the mid-season break. We'll see after Christmas what's going to happen with Reese. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. So, no, fun time. Enjoyed it quite a bit. And I'm looking forward to the next one. So let me know what you thought of this episode of Person of Interest in the comments. You can, of course, support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Or if you want help for free, just hit the like button. It really does help. So thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got Eddie Vanilla?